now we're going to have a panel about powering a growing ecosystem in the era of AI. Please give a warm welcome to Dorothy Lee, CVP of Microsoft Security Copilot, Ecosystem, and Marketplace.
Well, welcome, everyone. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And today we have 3 partners with us. We have Andrew Rubin from Illumio, we have Mark Hughes from IBM, and Ugur, did I say your name right? Yes. From Glue Canyon.
Yeah.
We'll learn about the joint value and opportunities for our partners directly from these 3 folks that are building and deploying AI technology right now. So let's please welcome, and let's hear it. Start with the journey of how we are building and deploying them right now. So let's start with our journey. This is for all of us. What motivated you to integrate with either Sentinel Platform or Security Copilot? What opportunities did you see? What gaps did you see in your existing AI workflow?
Yeah, so we were looking for a platform that will support our mission in resolving security incident as fast as possible. And we also had a look into getting more context around how do we really work on incidents. So what really is great on Sentinel is you have options to basically connect to different first-party services. So just collect identity information from Entra ID, endpoint data from Intune, and also some customers use Purview for data classifications. So having all of this in one place really helps create the baseline context. And then on top of it, if you use Security Copilot and all the AI, to really build on top of the reasoning layer, that really helps and accelerates all work on incidents.
Yes, and you guys are having fun, right?
We are having a lot of fun creating a lot of agents, yes.
Yeah. Mark, any thoughts?
So what I think we are in is a world where at IBM we're already delivering and really have put a lot of agents in place running together agentically to do a lot of security tasks that we know are now really becoming up much quicker and much more automated, and we'll talk about that more later on. But one of the challenges that we've got to now, despite the fact of having all these agents, these digital workers now working, is how do we crack that next big step, which is about asset intelligence? How do we get that context foundationally aware so that when we do our investigations, that we actually understand what context it is? Now, working with Sentinel Lake, that is now the real opportunity where we've come together working with Microsoft to now begin to drive and build up that asset intelligence that allows us now in security to take that really big next step into understanding genuinely what context it is that we are looking at all of those alerts that we have coming in increasingly from AI agents to then be able to contextualize that, which allows us to actually open the door to then actually remediate in real time. And that, in terms of how we're working with Microsoft, is genuinely groundbreaking. The underlying graph technology in Sentinel Lake, if you haven't seen it, get involved very quickly because it's, I think, a complete game changer.
Yeah, and context really is everything in security. Thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, so for us at Illumio, we've believed in and built on graph for a decade. It's the foundation of everything that we do, and it's what both of our products, our Insights product and our segmentation product, are delivered on top of. And so when we saw what Microsoft was doing with Sentinel Lake, an opportunity to really, for the first time, aggregate large disparate amounts of information from the 1P and the 3P ecosystem, taking all that and putting graphing capability on top, which, again, we believe in foundationally, and then obviously layering the agents and AI on top to do that analysis. It's a very, very powerful change in the cyber story, but I also believe very deeply that we have a math problem in cyber in that we're constantly playing catch up. We don't have all the data we need. We don't put all the telemetry in one place. We don't have the ability to analyze it continuously. And putting all these pieces together for the first time gives us a chance to change the math.
Absolutely, and you used to say, and when we were met a few weeks ago, that agents don't sleep, right? And so this is another dimension. Back to agents, I know, Ugur, your company had been deploying agents. In fact, it's one of the most popular agents in our store. And when you were deploying these AI agents, what were some expectations versus reality that you can share?
We have like 15 agents currently in the security store. Quite a journey, to be honest. When we first started, we didn't want the agents to be just some kind of script runner. We wanted to have it more intelligence and more context around solving this issue. So we looked into which use cases do we and customers have to solve problems, make life easier for everyone, basically, with all the integrated services in Microsoft. And when we started, we basically started with the first skills, building on top of API skills, KQL skills, GPT skills. And it's actually way easier than we thought about creating agents, very surprisingly.
And that's why you're having fun.
Yes.
Switching gears a little bit, and Andrew, and we talked about context, and these models are getting, the high reasoning models are getting more and more sophisticated. Yep. But what have you learned in designing agents, designing AI-driven workflows? What have you learned in practice that you can share with our audience here?
So I think that part in practice is the most important part, and maybe it sounds contrarian, but I don't think it should be. We talk about automating the mundane. So it's very easy to get very excited about what this is going to look like 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now and how it could literally change everything. But we all know that there's millions of cyber jobs that are not filled today. Everybody is scrambling to try and keep up. The beautiful part about automating the mundane, taking some of the simplest, but also some of the most manual and costly tasks that we try and do every day, is by building things that essentially go after the low-hanging fruit. Building agents that will do the job of the threat hunter, not literally, but 24/7, 365, be doing that analysis so that the threat hunter can more effectively focus on the right things. By automating those mundane tasks, I think 2 things will happen. One, we will change that math equation. We need continuous everything. Our attackers clearly have no problem with continuous everything. As defenders, we need to figure out how to do that. And the agent story allows us for the first time. I did joke a couple weeks ago, there's no lunch, there's no bathroom breaks, and they never go home to go to sleep. But I also think that we have the ability to build agents that will tackle tasks that we as people are not, quite frankly, very good at. And I think the power of the continuous monitoring and then automating things that we can't do at human scale very well, if we can bring all that together, I think that you really do have a very different set of dynamics around how we defend.
That is so true. And when I talk to many CISOs, that theme, right, automating the mundane actually really echoes, in addition to help see things that humans cannot see. Mark, coming to you at IBM, you touch on many customers. And what are some of the things that you see customers struggling?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it's really interesting because, as Andrew was just saying, automating the mundane is unbelievably valuable. And if we get it into the reality of what that actually means, at IBM we have over 60 agents running now in over 200 of our clients, some of the largest global companies. And we are seeing, that, for example, in the SOC, I'm sure we all really can relate to that use case. The tier 1 analyst, that's pretty well gone. And it's not just about a single agent doing that. It's about, we have an agent that does, an IP address lookup. There's an agent that formulates a plan if there's an alert. And all those have been built on specific small language models that can really bring that to life. And then you can then get those working together agentically. And once they start working together, you're off to the races. Because then not only are you beginning to get potentially better accuracy, but also that concurrent working brings speed. But, Dorothy, to your question, what that brings is, one of the struggles that we see many clients, despite the 70% type productivity savings that we're seeing, is that requires a fundamental shift in how you think about how you all manage and deploy your security capability in the enterprises. Now, this is not new to us, right? We went through in the security world, the EDR shift. Remember when we all deployed the great SIEM tools and EDR tools? We had to rethink our operations and how we went through and looked at how we manage security. So the first thing I think is, one of the struggles is, okay, so we've got all this great stuff now that we deployed and is running, but how do you then adapt your organization to start to speed up and to work differently? Second thing is, do we really trust it? Do we really trust the outputs? And I come back to what Andrew just said. Look, we all make mistakes. And the agents make mistakes as well. We call it hallucination, but let's call it really what it is. They make mistakes. And so how do you cope with that? How do you get to that level of trust? Well, the first thing is small language models built upon real, stuff that we know and we've built in IBM and managed services for years. We've built the models on real data that actually has been taken from real instances of where we've been working with our clients. The second thing is, let's not walk into this thinking it's going to be brilliant. We've built reflective agents, controlling agents that sit across those other agents. And they're looking for the patterns, and they're saying, is it, and are we expecting to see what we thought we should see out of these particular outcomes? And of course, how do we then maintain the human in the loop until we can get confident at each layer as we build in? But to give you some really specific example, we're working with one client at the moment that has set us the challenge of 1, 10, 60, detect within a minute, contain within 10, remediate within 60. We've done the first 2. And that's now without human in the loop, because that would slow things down. So that's, 110 is pretty good. And the last bit we're just about to implement, hopefully in about January next year. And the reason why that is proving much more challenging, it's back to what I said earlier on about you have to drive the context and understand the context to actually get the remediation, where often that remediation is done way outside of security in IT operations or in the supply chain. So that's a bigger challenge. But just to give you some idea, that's, I think, a couple of things in terms of how our clients I see struggling with them. How do you change, and how do you trust and get the veracity in terms of what the agents are up to?
Yeah, for sure. So earning trust, just like humans, right? Agents also have to earn trust. And that's a good segue to the next question, which is part of earning trust is how do you see the outcome? Yep. How do you measure the outcome of these agents? So thoughts on that, Andrew?
Yeah, so what we've tried to do is make sure that as we're having these conversations, and honestly, back in Sunnyvale, an hour away from here, as we're building these things, we're trying to make it very use case specific and use case driven. In other words, as opposed to thinking about the art of everything possible, we're trying to look at it through the lens of there are certain jobs that we know are happening inside of that SOC every day, that are happening inside of the IR team every time they need to do work. And we're trying to think about how do we build things that will allow those folks to do their job either faster, more efficiently, or with more accuracy. And obviously, putting all 3 together becomes the holy grail. We're trying to make sure that if we look at how, let's say a SOC is operating today, and then we say to them, if you deploy this graph with these agents and you automate these things, let's look at it 30 days from now, 90 days from now, and see, is it operating differently? Yeah. And what Mark said, I couldn't agree more with, which is this is not just about technology. We can give them all the tech. If we don't get them to change the operating model along the way, then you've got something disjointed there. And so I think that's the impact, is really seeing the operational change and seeing outcomes that we weren't able to achieve before.
Right, and I also say to customers that with agents, you actually have a lot of transparency. You can see how agents think, you can see their outcome, which sometimes with humans, you don't always have that level of transparency. Right? And so, Mark, earlier we were talking about building an ecosystem, how important that is to building a complete graph, if you will, right? No one, we say in security, it's an end-to-end game. So how do you think about ecosystem playing a role in this AI-first platform?
Hugely, hugely important. And back to my point about driving context. So we have to really broaden the aperture. I think in security, we've been very good at narrowing the aperture to be able to say, look, we can only afford this much, ingestion rates into SIEM tools. There's always been that almost self-inflicted constraint that we put upon ourselves. That world is now changing. And that world now with things, as I mentioned earlier on, like Sentinel Lake, where you can now begin to join dots together, but those joining the dots comes with the fact that we have to reach across the aisle and really embrace that entire ecosystem of understanding where those assets are and how we can then actually get data from them and telemetry to drive the ability to knit together, to enable much richer threat hunting, much better attack analysis, for example. So that, in terms of the ecosystem, therefore, is, first and foremost, it's about using what's already out there. So the notion that we've been in this world in security where we have to sort of rip and replace a lot, that I think we really have to move beyond quite quickly, and the technology is driving us in that way now. There's a lot of stuff that we spent many years deploying and tuning up. That telemetry is there in that ecosystem. How do we embrace that, bring that in, get the links put into that underlying graph technology that we talked about, to then get the security agents working across as well. And that means that it's not just about how we orchestrate the security ecosystem, which is challenging often in its own right. Think about identity has often been done in a bit of a silo from managed service operations. Those things are all now coming together. But also, how do you embrace the ecosystem much more broadly in our organizations, across IT operations and other places, to really make sure that we have that, and through the supply chain as well. So I think, Dorothy, that is, again, not a particularly technical challenge, but it's a challenge that we as leaders have to get into if we really want to take advantage to get that better asset intelligence, to enrich what we're doing, to face up to some of those challenges and those threats now that, as you know, are just speeding up all the time.
For sure, it really takes a village. We hear a lot these days about how AI is, how bad actors are using AI at speed that's never seen before. In fact, just a few days ago, some of you may have heard about the first completely AI orchestrated attack that our Anthropic had released a report on. When it comes to defenders using AI, what are some of the things that you look forward to of how we use defenders using AI to achieve impossible outcomes?
Yeah, I think it's important to just understand that attackers use AI. We, as defenders, also have to use AI, just battle AI versus AI, basically. It's important because we are, like, as humans, I'm not that fast enough to click through, understand all issues in incidents, go through all the alerts as well. I think if you have AI battling against AI, the context really matters. What we try to do with the agents, for example, is help our tier 1 SOC analysts do not just do these manual tasks that are boring. We try to level up everyone to work on these more important tasks there, to really solve the problems and not just do the manual work. So the agents are really good to help with the workflows, basic workflows, and then you as a person can then focus on the more important tasks to resolve issues.
Right. Well, I'm going to go off the script just a little bit, riff on this idea. Do we think defenders have an edge? And if so, what are our edges?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with that, Dorothy. I think it comes back to that. If we can really embrace now to get better context, really get the asset intelligence and real exposure management, I think that's something that just, how many threat actors have and how many agents they have, that's always going to be a challenge. I mean, look, it's a challenge enough for us today in this room. I work with so many clients, just to understand the entirety of their estate and where they may be vulnerable is still a huge challenge. If we can now use the tools that we see emerging to really get that better context and that asset intelligence, that I think is going to give us the edge. But it means that a lot of us, in the world that we've been in, have to change our thinking a bit to broaden it much more into areas that means that we will have that context. So I think that will give us the edge if we can get there and move quickly on that.
Right, and we have to have the visibility, right?
From a practical perspective, I think if we just want to be honest about it, if we want to be transparent about where we are in the journey right now, let's acknowledge that both the attackers and the defenders obviously have these tools in their hands already. The attackers, by definition, couldn't care less about rule of law, ethics, morals, or anything else, so they wouldn't be attackers. Defenders, in theory, are operating within rule of law and a set of guardrails that keep us on what we believe to be the good side of the table. By definition, the math is stilted in the direction of the attackers, at least early on. That's just the truth. They're going to go faster. They're going to try things that the defenders are not willing to try. And these tools being in both hands do not mean that they're in both hands equally. I do think that over time, if we reframe the way that we think about using these tools as defenders, and I go back to the fact that I think cyber's biggest problem is not tooling, it's not data or telemetry, we've got plenty of all three, it's a math problem. We are trying to find a needle inside of a haystack or a few needles inside of many, many haystacks, and that's a bad math equation as a defender. I think this is the first time that there's a fundamental change in the technology and operating model where we might be able to change the math equation. We're not there yet, but we have a shot. And if we do, it could change the entire thing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Last question, and perhaps the most important one for everyone here in the audience. What is the one piece of advice that you could give for folks here as you're deploying AI and getting AI adopted in your organization?
So our way, I mean, we were fairly successful with our agents so far. When we started, we picked a single use case and tried to solve it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense to solve a very small issue there, but it gives you an idea of all the possibilities around it and really opens the door, makes you very creative on which issues and agents you want to create and what to fix. And then it just piles up and gets more use cases, building agents for.
Yeah, it's a beautiful adoption pattern.
Well, a couple of things. First thing, try to buy into a security ecosystem. And we're sitting here, we're all bought, I'm sure, into the Microsoft ecosystem. So get away from tool deployment and all the usual things that we've worried about in security for many years. Understanding that good enough is just that. And then building on that with the agents to really extract value, which is there today. If you can deploy those agents to get them working very quickly, we'll see a very strong ability to be able to achieve better results, better speed, better accuracy, much more quickly. And so I would say get after where those use cases are, where you can see that ROI coming out very quickly. I talked to a number of clients now, and with some of the gains that we're seeing in productivity and the like, they immediately realize that they can then reinvest some of that hard-won budget into things that are really important. And I will, Dorothy, if you just allow me to take one other piece of advice, which is we've talked today about how we're using AI for security. Let's not forget, in many clients where I talk to them, how they secure the AI that they are deploying more broadly into their enterprises is a challenge that they're only just beginning to really think about. And the one thing I would say from what I hear from many clients is trying to block stuff isn't the way ahead. There's got to be a comprehensive thought process around how that gets adopted and the right security wrapper is put around it. So a couple of things.
Great, so true, yeah.
And I would just say, and I don't think it's specific to adoption of AI for cybersecurity. I think it's probably generally good advice for all of us to remember. But the difference here is that because of the speed, it becomes even more important. The old expression about the enemy of a good plan or a great plan is always a perfect plan. This is one of those things where you could sit in front of the whiteboard for the next 2 years, mapping out the perfect strategy, and two things are guaranteed to happen. You will never have it, and 2 years from now, you will have done nothing. Start small, do something, learn from it, iterate quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously, the technology itself is moving faster than anything that any of us have ever seen, but there's value to be extracted, and you don't need a perfect plan in order to extract it. You have to be willing to take some chances, go quickly, and learn and iterate as a result.
Great advice. Do not let perfect be the enemy of good. Thank you very much. And all great advice. I think this concludes the end of our panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.